welcome to another episode of Better You. I'm your host Dre, and this is Weekend Roundup. I don't really got a title for this segment. I want to touch on two things really quickly. One, Eboni K Williams, her comments from the Grio, and then later in the interview from the Breakfast Club. Because there's a few pieces that I feel like people aren't really speaking on, at least in mainstream media, they aren't speaking on. And then the revelation that Nia Long exposed the woman that Udoka had an affair with. I don't really disagree with Nia Long's comments and sentiments, but I do feel that there's an additional wrinkle in that adds another dimension to it, if you will. So, without further ado, Eboni went onto the Breakfast Club, and yeah, I think it's striking two things. Just for those who don't know, just really quick synopsis. A couple days ago on the Grio, Eboni said that black women who are in college, who desire family, should prioritize also getting a mate in college if they, especially if they prize having somebody who is of a similar background in terms of college education. She basically said it's a pool of ever shrinking good men as you age for a woman, and that frankly a lot of the things that we as a community have directed to our women, such as young boys, are a distraction. Prioritize yourself, prioritize your education, prioritize your wealth, prioritize gaining status, and then try to get the family. She has essentially expressed her opinion that it's not a very viable strategy for most. And in that regard, I would tend to agree. However, during the interview on the Breakfast Club, it was framing similar to the last time she was there, in which she calls black men, she's basically, I think it's very revealing. It's a lot like reading this lady here, if you're paying attention to certain things. A few blinking you'll miss it type of things. I think it's very telling that she essentially mentioned that the more money that she made, the less essentially malleable or cooperative, submissive she would be, or she was. And she mentioned that basically the more wealth that she acquired, it just basically took it to different levels. And it's often said that men have a problem with women who out-earn them, but I thought that was very insightful because it ties into this lady right here. In one of her chapters, she talked about how women, there are certain women who seek to dominate their partners. And I heard that in a lot of what Eboni was saying, but I felt very misandrous in terms of her framing, saying like, hey, what about when you want to travel? You don't have to worry about somebody dusty son, like they can't tell you. It was a lot of very petty and unneeded distractions from the conversation, from the larger conversation. And once again, she came back to the calling men mediocre, and for the thousandth time, most people are. For those who don't know how words work and how math works, most people fall in a particular range which you can call average, which you can call mediocre. They're synonyms. And there's nothing wrong with that. And she talked about that aspiration for luxury. And I think that's part of the problem with the larger community. There are a lot of people who, frankly, how my granddaddies would put it, you got Cadillac dreams, but you only got Chevy money. Probably a little dated, but essentially like, yo, you have luxury aspirations and you want a luxury lifestyle, but the reality is you probably not gonna live that, and that's okay. You can live a decent life without ever having a Louis bag, without ever having some red bottoms, without ever wearing Hermes. Honestly, like, a lot of these same people talk about the importance of building generational wealth. But if that's really such an important thing to you, why the fuck would you go buy a garment that is thousands to tens of thousands of dollars instead of actually putting that into things that could generate and sustain generational wealth? Think about it for a second. There's some garments and bags that's like $10K. That's a down payment on some. For certain parts of the country, you can get a lot of land. That's a down payment on an asset, like a house or a property. That can buy a good number of stocks. So I found it very, I don't know, it just struck me as very deflating from an observant man's perspective. Simply because I feel the conversation went in a good direction, in that she's trying to give women a little bit of game. And it's one of those things that ultimately is a perspective that places value back upon black men, which I'm all for, which I feel is part of a serious problem in our community, which is there's a misandry present that is like water to a fish. Like, so many people accept it and don't even see it, even men themselves that are targets of it. And that's the sad part of the framing. It's like, you know, even when you're not in the room, even when you're not directly engaging in the discussion, it's like, oh wait, okay, yeah, I'm having this discussion, I'm speaking to this young lady, but let me do this drive-by real quick. Nigga, you ain't shit. Yeah, back to what I was saying. It's like, what? Why? I hate to say it, but that's probably why you're single. I mean, that type of energy, you can't turn that on and off. I mean, yo, that is sad. That's the way I see it. I see the whole thing is sad. I think it's good that she tried to speak life into our women and give them a different perspective. I think it's sad that she clearly looks down on black men in a particular way. Black men of a particular class. Her comments really does show that she feels that she's better than a lot of her men, male peers, and she likes humility. And then the other part of it that's also sad is like, there's a lot of women who were in the comment who agree with what Ebony said, and then they were other women going so hard in the paint back at them. And it's like, wow. Like, how? Like, how the fuck did we get here? I think it's very interesting and very telling that, you know, there are those who it's like, it's one thing to not want to be married. I don't believe marriage is for everybody, but it's like they despise anybody that has anything positive to say about the concept of marriage, or anybody who wants to be married or is married. And it's like, wow. Those poor dogs and cats. But to move on, Nia Long also earlier today exposed the woman that was having an affair with Udoka. Her name was Kathleen Lynch, and I believe the husband was Thomas Lynch. So to kind of wrap it up in a nutshell, so I'm not here too long, the premise of everything, of Nia's comments, were that essentially she called cap the whole protect women thing and how the situation was handled. She said, I think it's very interesting that everything was mobilized to protect this white woman. And we're out here talking about protecting women, but nobody had that consideration for me. And the public embarrassment and exposure that was that she was put through the whole situation, but how atypical and messily it was handled. And I don't agree. I don't disagree with her at all. She talked about how white women's tears are essentially seen as valuable, and that, you know, in a nutshell, like a white woman cries, like people spring into action, while nobody really cares about, you know, our black women in that same manner. In regards to that aspect of it, I think there's another perspective that I see when I look at it. So that woman, Kathleen, is connected to Danny Ainge. Her and her husband are connected to Danny Ainge, like they're all Mormons, and there's some significant personal ties from what I understand. So the whole thing's a bit messy. Like the husband, from what I read, allegedly dropped dime on the whole situation, and the way I see it is not so much a social racism in which everything conspired to throw Nia and Ime under the bus because of explicitly because of their blackness. However, what I did see, and the way I see it is, that was the white patriarchy. And once again, you're gonna hear that term on my channel a lot. When I say patriarchy, think racism. They're synonymous. A lot of times people love to use that P word and wield it against black men in a particular manner. And I'm personally feel that we should use that word to beat back against it, to make it as hilarious as it honestly sounds when it's wielded against us, because we get accused of a lot of things that white men do, ironically, and we are not those guys. But tangent aside, I viewed it as the patriarchy conspiring to protect the reputation of itself in somebody it was connected to. It just happened that Kathleen, by her proximity, was a beneficiary of it, and Nia Long and Ime Udoka, Nia Long, by her proximity to Ime Udoka, was on the other side of it. So I'll walk you through how I see it. Due to these personal connections with former Celtics legend, the great Danny Ainge, aka the Torture Chamber. Once the situation really got exposed, I believe the reason why her name was kept out of all the reporting in the media and it was very hush hush was simply to, one, keep Danny Ainge from having to answer any questions due to those close personal ties, but also to keep things quiet and private for their family. And then also to make an example out of Ime Udoka. Typically, the way these types of situations are handled when you have a consensual affair is either you reprimand, like i.e. document that person, and you allow them to keep the job, maybe even take certain responsibilities away from them to try to make sure that situation doesn't happen again, or you fire them. The way that the Celtics handled it was very atypical in that they suspended him indefinitely for the season. So essentially, they kept him on the team, did not allow him to do his job, and kept him from being able to go and join another squad and coach elsewhere. So essentially, they took a year of employment from him. I've never seen shit like that. It would be, to kind of put it in layman's terms for an everyday person, it would be like, hey, if it was discovered that you had intimate relations with a coworker, it would be like the job saying, hey, look, don't show up to work, but you still technically employed and on the roster. And yeah, if you try to go anywhere else, I'm gonna hit you with that non-compete. Like our lawyers, we got Nintendo lawyers. Like we about that. It's just very, very petty. But I believe once you kind of take that perspective and that lens of it, I believe it makes sense. Like, yeah, they're protecting themselves. Danny don't want to answer those questions. He also doesn't want to put her name out there because now his friend, or her in this guy that he has proximity to, has a relationship with, he doesn't want that same media attention and grilling on them at the meet. Conversely, he probably feels some type of way towards Ime, in which out of that anger, he's making an example out of him. I'm gonna put you on Front Street. Now, because he's put him on Front Street, you see where I'm going with this? And made his indiscretions publicly known and tarred and feathered him, people automatically are going to go and look at his fiance, Nia, what's going on over here? Like, what's happening? You see what I'm saying? So it's one of those things in which I don't feel. Let me rephrase it. I feel it's deeper than how it was phrased at the surface level. Race definitely plays a big part in it, and I'm not saying that it doesn't. But this situation, yeah, I don't so much view it as society mobilizing to protect this white woman as much as it's society, that white patriarchal society mobilizing to protect itself, as well as to punish this young uppity coach for his indiscretions. But I don't know. That's the way I see it. I won't drag it out any longer. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Peace. Hope you all have a great weekend. I am out.